I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darrell Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darrell Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darrell Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darrell Lee makes Christmas better.
You're listening to a DM podcast.
This is The Five of My Life, with me, Nigel Marsh, the series where I talk to notable people about their chosen film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. I devised this series as a slightly different way of revealing the real lives and thoughts of prominent people. Today's episode features 5 of my previous guests, all talking about their 5 of my life films. Journalist Kate McClymont, media personalities Gus Warland and Usha Gonsberg, politician Tanya Plibersek, and author and radio host Richard Glover. Heartbreaking, funny, thought-provoking and revealing. I hope you enjoy these stories as much as I did. Kate McClymont is an investigative journalist best known for her series of articles and books about politician Eddie Obeid. Over her much awarded career, she has expertly and courageously exposed the corruption of those in powerful positions, be they in politics, sport, trade unions or the media. We're going to start with your film, and you've chosen a Robert Redford film, not one that he acted in, but the first one that he directed. And like many people who are blessed, this first film that he directed, he won the bloody Oscar for Best Director for it. But you've chosen Ordinary People, 1980. Tell me why you chose that and the story behind it.
Look, I think why I chose it was I absolutely love stories about the inner workings of people's lives, because I think often, there's always a veneer of respectability of people like to put on a show that their lives are, near perfect or they're pretty happy. And this is a story about what happens in, an upper class family in America when a tragedy besets them. Now, my brother drowned when even now, even after all these years, it's hard to explain to people how much a tragedy in a life really affects your family, the family dynamics, and has reverberations for years. So I think because my brother drowned, this film really just encompassed so much of my own life and the aftermath of what happens. But it's still, I watch it every decade, and it is still just a brilliant, brilliant film and a quiet film. It did win, I think, 4 Oscars, and I think Robert Redford won I think there was Best Oscar for direction for screenplay, and Timothy Hutton, who played the young boy in the family, he did as well. But the other thing was that Mary Tyler Moore, who was known as a comedian, she just plays the most brilliant role as the uptight mother, just not able to cope with the enormous change that has beset her family. And it's so sad.
Now, in the film, the boy dies in a drowning accident like your brother, and the family sort of disintegrates in the aftermath.
Yes.
Would you mind talking a little bit about the effect of how old were you and your brother? It was in a dam, wasn't it?
Yes, I was 12, and I have an older brother, and then it was my next brother down, and then my younger sister. But it had the most shocking impact on my younger sister, because my brother and I went back to boarding schools within a week of the accident. And even that was isolating in itself. But there was my sister stuck at home with 2 broken, grieving parents. And it's just I still think about it now, how ghastly that must have been for her. Like, really hard.
And how are you, your relationships with your brother and sister, through adulthood? Are you close?
Oh, yeah, no, really close. And then sadly, my parents were killed in a car accident. So apart from, those, and it's just that thing where I think people never quite understand how nothing, even though you've had one tragic thing in your life, nothing can save you from having something else terrible happen. Like, life is just so, capricious and cruel and joyful and wonderful that, I just sort of, the things that happen to you, of course, affect you for the rest of your life as well.
And your parents in a car?
Yes.
Gosh, and you were in your 20s, weren't you?
Yes. So it was, yes, it was hard, and it was hard. I think, I don't know. I think because my children, I had 2 young children at the time. I had a third later, but I think it's that thing where you have to keep going. You just have to put, one step in front of another. But, I used to speak to my mother, I think, almost every single day. And, I still think about them all the time, even though it was years ago now. And I sort of wish that my children had no grandparents at all growing up. But then you have to sort of look and think, well, look, there are other great things in life. There are other wonderful relationships that they've had with other grown-up people. So, you have to just take life as, the cards that are dealt to you, really.
I mean, you haven't got any choice.
No, that's the whole thing. Yeah. You don't have a choice.
Thank you for sharing that.
I don't know why I said those things.
Well, no, I really appreciate you being so open. I didn't mean to make you cry.
No. Oh, God, it's terrible. In 2 minutes, I'm crying.
Osher Günsberg is one of Australia's most recognisable and loved media personalities. Most recently on the screens as the host of The Bachelor and The Bachelor in Paradise, Osher has recently published his memoir, Back After the Break. So, Osher, without telling us what it is yet, which of the 5 items did you find the most difficult to choose?
Probably the favourite song, Nige.
Brilliant. I love that song. We're not going to say what it is yet. I love that song. And why did you find that difficult?
Because as someone who's had an entire career based in music, and like anyone, music forms, and we'll get to this unless we want me to talk about it now.
No, I don't.
No. Like anyone, music forms these extraordinary snapshots that pull us instantly back. There's a lot of songs, man, that mark really important times in my life, and so that was a toughie.
So, and how did you find the whole? Did the whole process make you feel sad, nostalgic, excited?
Going through your questions?
That's right, the 5 choices.
I found it very confusing because I'm in the middle of trying to fit. Like, I'm just so you listeners know, they're listening to this whenever they want. Time is not, a linear situation when you're listening to a podcast. You put them on when you're ready. But this morning, I'm 25 minutes late for Nigel because this is the day I hand in my book. I have in that backpack right there. I have 342 pages of work in the Uber I was going to drive here, but I'm so late with my deadline. In the Uber, I took an Uber, and on the front seat, I'm like, sorry, buddy, I'm going to give you 5 stars. I promise you, but I just have to work. And I had the laptop open on my lap while we were hurtling through the inner city of Sydney trying to get to the studio here. And I'm frantically typing away because as soon as I finish here, I've got to race up to my publisher's office and put the thing on his desk before noon. Like, because we're printing presses are on booked and they're ready and they're waiting for this thing.
Mate, we are honoured you've squeezed us in. And congratulations, by the way. It's a big deal, especially if it's a memoir.
It is a memoir, and it is a big deal. But like many other things that I've found that were totally beyond my scope, like that, I couldn't possibly do that. That's for people who know how to do those things. It is just one more thing in my life that is at first utterly insurmountable, and then go, hang on, if I just break this massive thing down into half, and then break those 2 things down into half, and break those 4 things down into half, and keep halving it and halving it and halving it and halving it until I've probably got, a couple of 100 steps. And then just take one at a time. And then before you know it,
you're there.
you're there.
You chose The Matrix. We're going to start with your film.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm glad you've chosen The Matrix because, full confession, I've seen that film once, 19 years ago, totally pissed, didn't understand a minute. So could you explain what the hell was going on before you tell us why you've chosen it?
In the film?
The film. I've got no idea what's going on.
The film is like, I love it for so many reasons, Nige. I love it because of how it was made. It was made by a pair of brothers who are now a brother and sister. Get your head around that.
One has transed. Or
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. The brother who's now a sister, I've seen her speak and she says, "Oh, I'm so happy for my time in Sydney. It was transformative," and she brought the house down.
Yeah,
it was absolutely brilliant. And the way that film came to be, that it was sold as a trilogy, and no one had ever done that before, and it was kind of this movie that was brought down to Australia. It was one of the first big, massive, made hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was made right here in Sydney. I think it was the second film they shot at Fox Studios after Dark.
Okay.
Dark City, I think, was the first one they shot there. So it was really full on. And I was here in Sydney when they were shooting it. So Keanu was running around on motorcycles and helicopters, and it was all happening. And so it was a very exciting thing. And then when it came out, it was just so utterly mind-blowing as far as what they were doing with the filmmaking, with the process of the filmmaking, and not only the special effects, but the special effects, the concepts, the bullet time, which as an advertising executive you would have seen in 70,000 pictures after the moment that film came out. So
Sure.
while you may have only seen The Matrix once while drunk, you have seen rip-offs of footage of films, of moments of it. It's like if you've never seen a Hitchcock film ever, you will watch a Hitchcock film and go, "Oh, that's that
I
thing
recognise
from
that,
That's
yeah.
The Simpsons." Because The Simpsons constantly steal shots and moves from Hitchcock. I'm pretty nerdy in case...
Well, no, because this is fascinating, because you are talking with passion, and I'm finding it interesting, but about the technique of making it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You still haven't told me what the fuck it's about.
Right.
What happens in the bloody film?
What happens in the film is that a man who is confronted by the reality that he's in, finding it boring, finding it, there's got to be more to this, suddenly gets told there is more to this.
Right.
You have to choose to see. It's going to be very uncomfortable.
Right.
You have to choose. If you want to know how there's more of this, you're going to have to do the rigorous, hard work to figure out how to live in this thing that you're existing in, or you can go the rest of your life not caring and just be a worker bee, be a drone, and
Right.
don't ever worry about it again. That's where you get. And you've heard this many times again. Red pill, blue pill.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
You, Nigel Marsh, are a man that's taken the red pill.
Right.
You have opened your eyes, you have broken free of the shackles of the things that were running your life, and you have, through rigorous introspection and through a great deal of, I'm going to be, assumptive here, but a great amount of pain, because you're like, what do you mean? I've got to let go of this thing that defined my life and drove me for so long. Oh, okay, I'm going to have to figure out a new way of living. Oh, now I've figured out this new way of living. Oh, I can navigate through this world that used to run me. I can walk around it in a different way, seeing things I never used to see because I went through that painful process of figuring out how it all works.
Wow.
That's the Matrix.
So I've got a phrase that I love, which is decide, don't slide.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I suppose, a lamer version of red pill, blue pill. Is just decide on your life.
Yeah.
Don't slide into it. It doesn't mean I want to look like Cary Grant. I'm never going to look like Cary Grant. So you've got to live with certain things you can't control.
True.
But you can decide that I will try and live life, I hate the word, proactively. I'll be in charge of it.
So just for a start, though, The Matrix was set in present day. The Matrix.
I'm sorry. I thought it was.
No. The Matrix.
I clearly didn't understand the
The
film.
Matrix was set in the present day, as
Right.
if like this world you live in right now is a simulation,
Right.
And you are just a line of code.
And do you recommend that I now, after this, go off and watch it?
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Well, then I'm.
Don't watch the second and third ones.
No, okay, I won't go.
Too much monologuing. Too much monologuing. A lot of monologuing. You're like, you just should have left it at one, guys. Should have left it at one.
Richard Glover is a best-selling author of 13 books, journalist for the Sydney Morning Herald and Washington Post, and presenter of one of Australia's most loved radio shows, The Drive programme on 702 ABC Sydney. Your film, I am really thrilled that you chose it, because I had never heard of it before. So in your honour, I watched it.
All right.
And
It's weird, isn't it?
holy moly.
It's weird.
I was going to Kate, this is sensational. It's a 20-year-old sleeping with an 80-year-old.
Yeah.
The music's by Cat Stevens.
Yeah.
I mean, why have I not heard of this film?
Yeah.
So would you mind telling me your story behind Harold and Maude?
Well, I just, I remember seeing it about 6 times over. So, and I don't know why, really, because looking at it now, it's just weird. It's really
very radical
weird.
for 71.
And then when I met my partner, my life partner, when I was about 21, it turned out she'd seen it like 10 times. So the reason I nominate it as one of my 5 is not because I think it's the greatest film ever, not because I particularly encouraging people to watch it now. In fact, I don't quite know what I would think if I watched it now. Just that I think it showed the hunger of the times for something different. So I grew up, in Sydney and in Canberra. I go to this private school in Canberra as an adolescent, and not that it was particularly bad or anything like that, but masculinity at the time in the 70s felt like a straitjacket rather than a smorgasbord. It involved attitudes to women I didn't have, attitudes to sport I certainly didn't have, attitudes to alcohol that I've spent the years since working on. But it just seemed a very constrained life, I suppose, and quite opposite to, life is not perfect at all now. But I do think our young men, in particular, just have a wider choice of how to be themselves than we did. And I think that's what drove you to. You went to the cinema and you saw this deeply odd film, which was about a young man who kept on staging these sort of mock suicides in front of his rich mother, and then had this relationship with this very sort of geriatric woman who turned out I won't give away the ending, but, it's
What a great performance by her.
Yeah, Ruth Gordon.
Yeah.
Great actor. And
So I was watching that. And
what did you make of it now?
So very weird. And thinking, if I was watching this in 1971, I'm watching it in 2018 thinking this is sort of ahead of its time. And you go, hold on, it was done 40 years ago. But what I actually thought, and this is not a line, this is true, is I just finished your book, The Land Before Avocados, talking about how Australia was. So it's really interesting to hear your explanation of why it might have resonated with you.
Yeah, the hunger for something that was not constrained.
Or can I in sort of blancmange, a bit sort of vanilla? You go, and then
it was incredibly bland monoculture. I mean, the book is I think it's quite patriotic in a way, because I don't think there's any country which has gone from there in 1961 or something to here, has travelled such a distance in such a short period of time, from the most bland monoculture, ethnically homogenous, economically protected, really difficult for anyone who is different in any way. The list goes on. But very few places have gone from such an extreme example of that to such a really great, and we are not a perfect society, but to such a place, 43% of the people in Sydney speak a language other than English at home. 43%, 40% were born somewhere else other than Australia. So, and that's one measure, but there's a million other measures of the fact that while it's not a perfect society, it's a very different society to the one of my childhood.
Sure. Do you know, reading, it's The Land Before Avocado is the correct title, isn't it?
The Land Before Avocado.
It is one of the stories that really resonated. And I think this is in like the first chapter, because it happened to my mum. And we laugh about it at the kitchen table. And it's interesting hearing you write about millennials thinking you're making it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You go, no, my mother, Margaret, who is alive and will listen to this, got married to John, my dad, and was therefore fired.
Yeah.
When
that's
she
right.
got engaged. When she
That's
announced her engagement. It's congratulations, Margaret. Here's
You're
a tea
fired.
party and you're fired. No one bats an eyelid. And life continues.
That's right. Well, the book is full of, the book plays the game of let's shock a millennial quite a lot, really, which is all these things where if you tell any young person, they'll just say, no, that cannot be true.
It can't be true.
So there's a million examples in the book. The one you cite is the marriage bar. So until 1966, in any Commonwealth government job, you get sacked the instant you get married because they don't want to take you away from your housewifely
It's like a Monty Python
duties.
sketch, but it's
And
true.
So the public service is full of women who are hiding their wedding rings or hiding their married name or hiding a pregnant belly under a billowy blouse in order to try to eke out another few weeks of employment and thus pay before the inevitable happens.
And talking
they
about
get
pay, the
sacked.
bank. I said to Kate, it should be reinstated. Where if she went to the bank and said, "I don't know, I want a loan," or we go,
Husband's
you go,
permission.
Could you get your husband in,
There
please?
are some things from the past that should be brought back, certainly. No, women couldn't really have credit. Single women had credit cards. Obviously, credit cards come in. Bank card comes in the late 70s. Before then, there are store cards. So you might have a David Jones card or something like that. But then once you get married, you have to give it up.
Amazing.
In order and get another one with your husband's permission. Until 1984, this is a good one to shock a millennial. Until 1984, married women need their husband's written permission before leaving the country. Until 1984,
It's amazing.
because you need to get your husband's signature before you get a passport.
And
Until
but you
1984.
are right. I've got twin daughters who are 18, and they think, "Dad, you're making it up." That just cannot.
cannot be
or
true.
it's from the 17th century.
Yeah.
Not it's from.
See, there are some things in the book where when I tell older people, they say, "Of course, Richard, don't be a moron. Everyone knows that. It's not even worth putting in the book." At the same time, the same fact, a younger person will say, "That cannot be true. You're lying." So, for instance, in the pages of the Australian Woman's Weekly and everywhere else, right through the early 70s.
They're not Ford pills.
Well, there are. I'll tell you about.
Are you fat?
I'll tell you about
heifer.
Ford pills, but I was just saying about the married names actually, that no married woman is called by her first name really ever. So even someone famous, you couldn't work out what their first name was. Even someone famous like Sonia McMahon, wife of the Prime Minister, great socialite at the time, is always described as Mrs. William McMahon. And she's photographed with Mrs. Bill Carruthers and Mrs. Bert Smith. It's a very gender fluid country, I can tell you. All the women have got men's names. Again, I say that to people my age and they say, "Well, mate, everyone knows that." In fact, my mother still gets letters from certain people addressed to Mrs. Phil Smith.
Mrs. Nigel Marsh. I opened one of my wife's letters because I thought they made a mistake. They put an S on the Mister.
Yeah.
Because why? I mean, there isn't a Mrs. Nigel Marsh. But apparently there is. I'm married to her.
Apparently there is. So that surprises people. You mentioned Ford pills. Yeah, there's lots of. It's funny because, it's a travel book really about this period, about the 60s and 70s. So I try to dive in and swim around in the period. You can do that really effectively with something like the Woman's Weekly. And there's some surprises along the way. The articles are really quite intellectual, actually. There's a great article about this rising British politician called Margaret Thatcher. What will happen to her?
Yes,
There's a really good piece on a young actress called Jackie Weaver and all that. So the articles are pretty good, actually, but there's this sadness that seeps from the advertising.
Yeah.
And the advertising is for the divorce agency, which, of course, you need the private investigator to get divorce because you need to prove divorce. The diet, constant diet pills.
Body shaming was next level.
Bex and Vincent tablets so that, people are drugging themselves constantly. Yeah, the Ford pill ad is fun.
So to make yourself, Ford pills will make you as attractive as the women your husband stares at in the street.
Yeah, and then the body copy says, "Have you looked at your husband lately? Not as your husband, but as a man. Have you looked at yourself? Not as his wife, but as his secretary. Don't be afraid of what you see. Start fighting. Take some Ford pills today." You know what they are, don't you?
They're laxatives.
They're laxatives.
Unbelievable.
So you may well get your husband's back, but make sure you're close to a toilet when you do.
Tanya Joan Plibersek served as a cabinet minister in both the Rudd and Gillard governments, also as deputy leader of the Labour Party and deputy leader of the opposition from 2013 to 2019. She's been a member of Parliament for Sydney since 1998. So Tanya, how did you find the process of choosing your five? Was that a bit sort of confronting, or was it easy, or?
It was a mixture. I mean, there are some really obvious things. I've always had a favourite song. I've always had a favourite author. But trying to have a sort of cross-section that gives you a bit of an insight into who I am more broadly. I think that was the hard thing. I could have just said Jane Austen, Jane Austen, Jane Austen, Jane Austen, but it wouldn't tell you very much.
It's
Favourite
not the
book,
five
favourite
books
film.
of my life,
Yeah.
Tanya.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you for taking it seriously. I really appreciate you buying into the spirit of it. Now, your film we're going to start with, you have chosen a film from one of my all-time favourite directors. He directed Brokeback Mountain, The Ice Storm, which is one of the best films ever made, Life of Pi. I mean, this bloke is rocking it. And you've chosen the 1995 Jane Austen adaptation, Sense and Sensibility. Tell me about that.
Well, I love Jane Austen. She is my favourite author, and I think this is really the only screen adaptation that truly does her novels justice. I think Ang Lee has the sort of sensitivity, the light touch that you need with Jane Austen, because she's very funny. The way she writes is very funny, but she does give you a sense of the whole of a person, so their strengths, their weaknesses, their foibles, but she does it in a way that's very affectionate. And I think this film does that. Like, I'm not a Jane Austen snob. I watch every screen adaptation. I've even seen the film of Emma, which Gwyneth Paltrow plays in, and I think that's an abomination to have someone like Gwyneth Paltrow playing a Jane Austen character, but nevertheless, I enjoyed it. But Ang Lee has just the beautiful mix of humour and sensitivity that you need to do justice to these really amazing novels. And, of course, Eleanor is my favourite Jane Austen character. Eleanor's the older sister of the three Dashwood sisters. And
Why is she your favourite?
she's my favourite because she's sensible, she's intelligent, she's responsible, and she feels deeply and strongly, but she doesn't have to display that all the time. Marianne, the middle sister, who is the sensibility in the title, so Eleanor's the sense and Marianne is the sensibility. Marianne's feels very deeply, but it's always on display. She's very melodramatic. She's passionate. What she reads, the way she reads it, the way she plays the piano. And poor Eleanor's left to deal with the fallout of their father's death and finding a new home and managing the family finances and caring for everyone around her. But she falls deeply in love, and she feels that she needs to keep that to herself. And I suppose what I like about Eleanor is that she feels deeply, but she doesn't feel the need to display that all the time.
So you speak wonderfully, movingly about Jane Austen in that film, but does she mean to you?
I actually did a speech for the Jane Austen Society of Australia. They have a big lunch every year for Jane Austen's birthday, and they invited me one year to speak to them, and I wrote Jane Austen Lessons for a Young Lady Legislator.
Oh, fantastic. Right, tell me.
I talked about, I reread all of the novels. I do that again and again. I don't know how many times I've read. Probably my favourite, Sense and Sensibility, I would have reread, I don't know, maybe 20 times.
Wow.
But I reread them all in a row, and I thought about the life lessons and the lessons for work that I've got from Jane Austen. And there's really quite a few of them, including, they're lessons about kindness and about making sure, I mean, in my job, you can think about how you suck up to people who are powerful, or you can think about how you help the people with least power. And I think, for example, in Emma, she has the obligation to be kindest to the people who need her help most. There's so many lessons for life in Jane Austen. What I really like about her writing is the way that your relationship with the characters changes as you yourself learn more about the world. So in Pride and Prejudice, you think, oh, what a silly woman the mother is, until you work out, hang on a minute, she's got 5 daughters that are going out into the world with nothing because the parents have basically spent their income as they've received it, you would be worried. You would be thinking about how they were going to marry and who they were going to marry and would they marry well. She's a beautiful, subtle, funny, witty, intelligent writer, and there's plenty of life lessons to be learned.
And to have an enduring appeal, especially around gender roles, and to be from such a different society and era, I think, what a genuine talent and gift that she had. The fact that you can be enjoying it and getting things out of it in 2019, given when she wrote it, is amazing. It's just fabulous.
And Pride and Prejudice, I think, in many ways, is a feminist novel. Elizabeth is saying, I don't want to marry unless it's for love, and she's quite explicit about how unfair it is that women don't get to choose. That they end up either married to someone for reasons of financial security, or they end up portionless and penniless. She says how unfair it is that they can't just, ride off and make their fortune as young men can. And I don't know whether Jane Austen thought of herself as making a statement about women's rights, but it certainly comes through in the novels.
Absolutely. And when are you going to take the top job?
Look, I've been very happy every day of my time in Parliament to be the member for Sydney, to be a minister or a shadow minister. It was a great honour to be the Deputy Leader of the Labor Party, a greater honour than I ever expected. So my focus is really on doing the job that I've got in the best possible way I can.
Well, you need to know that my wife's mates, so female book club, etc., they all want you to run for the top job.
Well,
so get over yourself and run for the top job.
Well, that's very kind and very generous of them. But, the most important thing is that we work as collaboratively as we can as a party and I think as a parliament across the parties to do the best for our nation. And personal ambition should be no part of that.
Gus Worland is one of Australia's most prolific and popular media personalities, having made numerous TV shows and hosted over 2,000 breakfast radio shows.
Gus, that's a lot of early mornings.
It sure is.
How do you cope with that routine? It's driving up the wall.
Yeah, it just sort of lives in jet lag mode. When you just sort of, your accent obviously from England, that trip back and forth, it just knocks you for six. And I think you eventually sort of just settle at that sort of mode, and you know that you'll be like that for most of your working life. And when you get some holidays, and that's a good thing about Brekkie Radio, you get good holidays, about 10 weeks a year. Within a week or so, you are back into the groove and life is good again. And to me, it's just life now.
And so what time would you, it's a boring question, what time do you go to bed? Do you go to bed at midnight and just have 3 hours sleep? Or do you go to bed
No, I've got to be in bed between 8 and 8:30 every night, and I wake up at 3:30.
And your missus, is it Vicky?
Yes.
So you're a dull husband?
Yeah, we have sex at lunchtimes, if that's where you're going.
Afternoon delight.
Afternoon delight.
I wasn't actually going the sex route, mate. That was you.
I'm not sure if it's afternoon delight, actually. It's just afternoon. Yeah, so we basically have worked out that, our lives have to be a little bit different. We don't go out for dinners as much.
We're going to start with your film. You have chosen a little-known indie film, Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Star Wars, for me, I suppose, now that you've seen so many different episodes of it, and the fact that they started it halfway through and then they went back to the start, it's all a bit confusing. But the actual original Star Wars for me was very important because my father had literally just moved out of the family home.
So this is 1970. You must have been 3 or something.
Yeah, no, so I was born in 1968. Thank you. Yeah. That's very kind. Yeah, so Dad sort of waited, I suppose, till we were reasonably sort of old enough, I suppose. But I never quite understood it, and I remember coming home one day and just seeing all these cardboard boxes at the front door. And I remember that's just really weird. And then I sort of bumbled along because I always lived in a bit of a bubble. In fact, I still do to a certain degree. And I remember Mum, we all sat down for dinner. I remember it really well. It was cutlets and mash and the 3 veggies. And Dad just sort of said, look, I want to talk to you about something your mother and I have decided. Wow. And then the conversation went from there. And I remember picking up my plate and throwing it against the the cooker and it's smashing and running away down to my mate Clint's house and staying there for 3 days thinking they don't know where I am and I don't care. But of course, Mrs. Newcombe had rung straight away back to Mum and say, I don't know what's happened. He hasn't told us anything, but he's obviously upset, but he's here and he's safe. And eventually I came home and I spoke to Mum, and she was shattered, of course, because it had been my father's decision. But she was old enough and adult enough, I suppose, to sort of put it in her brain in some way and went, well, now my life's focusing on you and your brother, and Dad will still be here on every Wednesday, and we started to make a bit of a routine. But I remember going to school and speaking to one of my mates and saying, oh, my mum and dad are separating. And he goes, yeah, my mum and dad are separated. And the way that he sort of shrugged his shoulders, and I went, oh, okay, well, maybe, I'm not the only one. And then the first or second weekend we went to my dad's was the opening of Star Wars, and Dad was a bit of a big deal in business. He was able to somehow jag a couple of tickets. So all of a sudden, this sort of Disney Dad appeared, and he was that Disney Dad then for many years,
Right.
because he did feel horrible himself that he had left the family home. So my brother and I were treated, if you like, to so many wonderful things that maybe other kids didn't get because Dad was feeling pretty awful about his decision.
And so how old were you when you threw the plate against the fridge?
Yeah, so I was about 10.
And presumably beforehand, you because a 9-year-old, you would have thought your mum and dad would like any other mum and dad and were completely. You must have been a bolt from the blue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what do you mean you're leaving your numbnut?
Exactly. I don't understand.
Why?
I don't understand this. And Dad and Mum seem to be really cool. I mean, and I've learnt now as an adult that, of course, adults, the way that they sort of look after each other in front of their kids are maybe different to when the kids are out and so forth. But Dad had wanted to make the decision from when I was about 2. So for him to wait as long as he did, in the end, I sort of realised now that, he thought that he had to live his own life. And now that I'm nearly 50, Dad's been a wonderful dad, and in fact, he's a wonderful grandfather too, probably better than he was as a dad. He's learned a lot of stuff about himself, and it was a pretty gutsy move to do what he did, but he did it.
And do Mum and Dad, are they
Still mates?
Yes.
Yeah, we still have Christmas together.
No way.
Yeah,
no way. And if you don't mind me asking, has he got another partner? Or?
Yeah, he's got another partner. Mum's never. Mum said, I fell in love with one man, and that's your father. And I can't. I think she probably had some affairs.
So she sits at
the
the Christmas table
sits
with Dad and his new partner.
And my brother and all our family and stuff, and it's normal.
That's just, you are, I mean, I am
lucky.
I am so vanilla white bread. My drama is my parents never got divorced. I haven't got any victim story.
Well, there's now that I'm a little bit older and I understand, I've been married nearly 25 years myself. For me, I understand now the pressures that come with marriage, and a decision that is made when you're in your early 20s may not be the right decision sort of 10, 15 years down the track. But I've been fortunate enough to have sort of picked the right one, and she's been wonderful to me. My mum never remarried, never had any significant other, and she's been sort of okay with that. I was only with her yesterday doing her yearly checkups and so forth, and we were talking about it, and she's like, I wouldn't change anything after the decision was made for her. She said, I would have obviously loved your dad to have loved me and stayed in the family home, but, she's had a good life. She's made the most of it.
So that's just a gorgeous story, Gus. Is the stepmum, as in your dad's current partner, presumably that's all lovely?
Yeah, that's all good, 40-odd years.
Wow. And is that the same lady from way back?
Yeah, first the person, yeah.
Gosh.
The 5 of My Life film episode could end here, but I had to sneak in this next story from Gus Worland about his chosen possession. And while not technically about a film, Gus's tiki candle came from one of Hollywood's biggest stars, so I thought it belonged in this episode.
So tiki, from my research, is a Maori human figure carved into it. So before you tell us why you've chosen this thing, could you describe it?
Yeah, I suppose it's about 4 inches tall and about 1.5 inches wide.
I thought it was like 8 feet tall.
No, this is a small thing that actually my best mate brought back from holiday when he went to New Zealand.
Right.
And he brought it back. It was a candle. But I've never lit the candle, and it's always sort of just been displayed somewhere in one of my rooms wherever I've moved around the world.
Right.
And it became such a thing that I used to, now when phones became available to take a phone call, take a picture, and then you could just send it off on a text, my mate and I started sort of sending these sort of photographs to each other. And he goes, I want to get that tiki back for a little while. And then I'll give it back to you. And it can be this sort of symbol of our relationship. Now, that person that gave me the tiki is Hugh Jackman.
The actor.
The actor, musician, overall great bloke.
Handsome bloke.
Handsome bloke. He is handsome. We went to kindergarten together. Then we went to prep school. Then we went to senior school. Then we did our gap year together. Then we went to the same uni. Then after that, when I got married, he was my best man. When he was married, I was his best man. He's godfather to my firstborn. I'm godfather to his firstborn. Like, we've stayed great mates, even though his journey has gone literally through the roof and up to the stars and back. Even to this day.
That's fantastic. So you are really, really close.
Super.
What a lovely thing to have in your life.
And this tiki, he sent me a photo the other day. He was unwrapping it when they had moved from one part of New York, and he decided to take the tiki down to the Hamptons, which is another place where they had built a beach house. And there the photo was, and he was unwrapping it. And it was a little video that Deb did of him unwrapping the tiki in that sort of bubble wrappy stuff. And he goes, there it is, it's still there. And it went up, so now it's down at the Hamptons. So I'll go there in October, which is for his 50th birthday. I'm taking the tiki back. And then I'll have the tiki for a couple of years, then I'll sort of go back and forth again. So to me, it's a silly little thing, but it means the world to me.
A huge thank you to Kate McClymont, Usher Gunsberg, Richard Glover, Tanya Plebisek and Gus Warland. You can hear the full 5 of Your Life episodes with each of these guests and many more fascinating people wherever you get your podcasts.